Hello, everyone. This is Elijah Bilel from the Side Hustler Society. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about e commerce, how to build an e commerce platform, the do's, the don'ts, and the pros and the cons. Taking a little lesson through history, y'all may probably remember that a few years ago, building an e commerce platform was probably one of the most popular things that you could do to make a lot of money. In particular, Amazon dropshipping got a huge name in the industry. Ever since then, the popularity has dwindled down a little since it's become, I don't want to say a little more regulated, but the conditions that it takes to enter the market have strickened a little, but it can still be a very profitable way of making money if you know how to do it. Of course, I've personally never done it. That's why I'm going to be bringing on a guest that can talk in more detail about this whole process of how to start a e-commerce business or platform in terms of today's standards. His name is Steven Pemberton, and he has generated over $3 million in revenue on e commerce platforms. His journey started when he lost everything in 2015 and has since managed to build a seven figure business which continues to inspire others daily. He now helps coaches, business leaders get in front of their ideal customers to accelerate their impact through a system called challenges. So, in today's episode, he's going to be breaking down the nuts and bolts of how to build a successful and profitable e commerce business. So, let's get into it.
Welcome to the Side Hustler Society podcast with your host, Elijah Bilel. This is where you can find out more about hustles that are best for you. And of course, make more money in the process. Elijah has been in the gig economy and freelance space for over 5 years and has done over 3,000 deliveries on Uber Eats. He's an Airbnb superhost, runs multiple YouTube channels, and is the author of the best-selling book, The Anatomy of Financial Success. It's his mission to empower people with the tools needed to be successful. Now, welcome your host, the king of side hustles, Elijah Bilel.
Okay, Steven, we're live. How's your day going so far?
Oh, my day is great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I love that intro, by the way.
Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I was looking at the I'm not sure if you keep up with like crypto and stocks and stuff, but I was looking into what's happening like earlier this morning. Apparently one of the exchanges for crypto is filing for bankruptcy, and people are losing their minds, like withdrawing Bitcoin out of their accounts. It's pretty interesting just to observe.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, speaking on that, is like, for me and my experience being in business for the last 4 years is, that's why I didn't get into crypto, because crypto was so incredibly volatile. Like, there's a very funny commercial. I'm not sure if you've seen it. I'm not sure if anyone listening has seen it, where the person, I think it's a TurboTax commercial, and he's sitting there, he's like, I'm a millionaire. Oh, I'm not a millionaire. Oh, I'm a millionaire. Oh, I'm not a millionaire. But that's really how crypto has been since its inception. And for you saying that, I don't keep up with it that closely. That's incredible that that's happening. And it's also a scary time, but that's why I love that you've made a podcast like this, to be able to share transparently what's going on in the world and to actually help people. Because like with crypto was, in my opinion, everyone wanted to jump on it because they saw people become millionaires overnight. But so many times people want to bite the silver bullet and just go fast and jump into something because it looks good, when really it's not sustainable.
They catch a mad case of FOMO, of fear of missing out. Yeah, I tell people all the time, this isn't the anti-crypto bashing podcast. I'm not going there, but I just tell people to put it in the category of speculating and not investing, because you invest in the stock market, you invest in real estate. They've historically crashed and bounced back, crashed and bounced back. They have cycles that's happened over and over and over again, and they're still here. But cryptocurrency hasn't gone through an official crash and bounced back the same way. So don't treat it as an investment, treat it as speculation, which means all the strategies you apply to speculation, meaning that you can afford to lose that money. If it does go away, it's not such a hurt. do speculation plays if we're going to dabble in it. Don't treat it like investing, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree, because even for us as in our e-commerce career and in our business, being able to generate over 3 million in sales is, once we started generating big money, what we did was we put our investments in hard assets. So in your intro, I saw where you had Airbnb host. For us, we have 2 Airbnbs. So that's where we put our money. We put our money in something that is physical, something I can walk into, I can see it, I can touch it. I can make changes to the wall color if it's not converting as well. But with something like crypto, and I feel this way to a certain degree with stocks too, is you can't palpably change anything. So if it's going great, awesome, you're making money. If it's going terrible, then awesome, you're losing money. But you can't do anything to influence it. With something that's physical like real estate, you can actually go and change the roof or change the windows or change the wall color or the couch and get a higher conversion rate because of that. So, yeah, just as you said, is speculate. And that's what we've done. I'm not going to sit here and lie. Like, we put some money into crypto, but it was money we were willing to lose because I didn't expect it to generate a return. I was just curious, like, hey, if it is as crazy as everyone said, then maybe my few $100 in here will generate, a 10x return overnight.
Nicely put. Yeah. And speaking of e-commerce, I know my audience is probably gonna be like, "Yo, that's interesting. Y'all diving into the crypto news and investments." But Elijah, save that for your Financial Anatomy channel. This is Side Hustler Society channel and podcast. Fair enough. Fair enough. So we can go ahead and hop into e-commerce. But a lot of people have actually heard about e-commerce and the benefits it can give you, but they don't actually have a physical, tangible, tactical definition of what is an e-commerce business. So with your experience in the matter, how do you define an e-commerce business?
What I define as an e-commerce business is, I'm going to go wide and then I'll go narrow. So with an e-commerce business is that can encapsulate anything from me selling this mouse to me owning my own brand and being someone like an Amazon, being someone where you have even digital products can be considered an e-commerce. It just means an electronic commerce. Electronically, I'm selling you something. So that's the very wide definition. Narrow for us, what we've experienced is with e-commerce, some of the easiest ways to get into it, and also some of the more scary ways is like Amazon. You'll see those kind of courses. You'll see people that are trying to be mentors. Drop shipping. Yep. Hey, I've done it. We've done every single business model that there is for the most part on e-commerce because we wanted to know what was actually out there. And if you hear of drop shipping, that's the one that most people are going to hear about. And it is the easiest to get into. It's the lowest barrier of entry. You don't need as much capital to get into it, but it's also by far the most volatile, no matter how you look at it. If you're getting onto Amazon and you're doing it, you're putting yourself at risk because they actually have policies in place that say do not drop ship. So if you get caught, they're going to shut you down. They're going to hold your money. I don't know if anyone has ever talked about it, but if you let's just say you have an incredible month drop shipping on Amazon, you make $100,000. And so you're waiting on that money to get paid back out to you because maybe you've been putting it on your credit cards and now you got to pay that off. But if Amazon shuts you down, they hold all of that money. They give you none. And that's indefinite. It's not as if they give you a time frame. Well, we got to hold your money until we see if there's returns. And then once returns come in and we process that, then we'll give you the rest of the money. It doesn't work that way. When they say, hey, you got shut down because of this, they hold all of it.
And since it's in their terms and agreement, there's very little you can do because you agree to them.
Yep, exactly. Now, there is some ways to be able to get your money back. We have been able to do that a couple times where we've had our account shut down, been able to get it back, been able to get our money out of it, but it's very scary. And the first time it happened was because of drop shipping. And then the other time it happened was because we were doing a legitimate wholesale. We had our own brand and everything, and we got shut down because of the supplier we used. And they even had all the legitimate paperwork to sell the products, but they didn't have it. They didn't have the right point of contact. The right point of contact in the actual company had quit. That gave them the paperwork, so they needed updated paperwork. And because they didn't get it and we were selling it, then we got shut down. And so Amazon especially, yes, they have over 100 million customer base. Yes, you're not having to do as much marketing, but at the cost of that, you're going to have much higher fees. You're going to have a much more volatile workspace. There's a couple different examples where there was a person that we knew who they were making almost $40 million a year with a home decor brand. And what ended up happening was Amazon kicked them off their own brand listing and then took it over and then relabeled it. And now you have Amazon Basics. So you have to be very diligent about watching what Amazon does. Amazon is they will muscle you out, and they're great. Like, don't get me wrong, we made a lot of money there, but also even during the midst of the pandemic, I want to address this too. People didn't understand that. Let's say I used to send in 2,000 units a month of my products and they would sell. Amazon would only allow you to send in 200 a month. So if you were doing thousands of units in sales, we had one person that was doing 20 million a year. They went down to 2 million. So that's a lot of money, 2 million, but that is, your profits are getting drastically slashed.
Yeah.
So you got to be hyper aware when you're in the e-commerce space, especially if you're using a platform, let's say Amazon, Facebook. They can change at the drop of a dime, and your business is left in the balance because you've picked a platform in the midst of it, because it gives you more authority, it gives you quicker sales, whatever it may be. That's what we experienced, was that volatility.
Interesting. So it's kind of like bringing it back to the Airbnb. Like, I do rental arbitrage, so I have deals with a landlord in apartment complexes where they know I'm.
That's it. Me too.
Perfect. Yeah. So in our cases, we made deals, and in my case, I negotiated a lower rent. But they're aware that I'm doing short-term rentals, and like basically, since they're aware of it, it's not like any fear of like it getting shut down, unless I'm irresponsible and someone throws a big ass party in there and that violates the lease. Yeah, there might be some danger then, but at that point, that's my fault. But as far as like if they see someone else in the unit, they're not going to care because they're aware I'm doing short-term rentals. But there are a lot of people out there, they don't even approach the landlords. They don't even try and do it the right way. And they don't actually read the lease that says, hey, there's no subleasing allowed here. So if a maintenance happens to drop by and see that someone else is in there, they're going to start asking questions, and they might just evict you just based off of that. It's like a very risky way of doing it versus a more structured and stable way. It sounds like when you're playing around with these platforms, I'll just use Amazon as an example. That's a good example of like it's kind of risky if that's just your only means of doing this. Maybe if you have your products available on more than one platform and you're building your own platform as well, you're a little more diversified. But if you're just solely based on one, that could be kind of risky, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why for us, what we ended up doing is when Amazon shut us down that second time, we had $58,000 invested in products. And so with that being said, is they were holding all that money. They were holding about $58,000. And so what we had to do, we only had about 2 months worth of operating expenses before we were out of business. So what ended up happening is we were trying to liquidate inventory. We were trying to figure out a different business. We were trying to do all these different things. And what we did was we got at the beginning of a trend with Facebook. And Facebook at the time, everyone knows Facebook Marketplace. It's kind of like a little nicer Craigslist. But they at the time had just updated and added shipping. So we were able to go on there and ship. And this is where I want to give you power and also want to give you vulnerability. Is the power of it was with no ads, zero ad spend. And in a year, we made $1 million, $0 in ad spend. So that's insane. There was months where we were getting 500,000 people looking at our products, no ads. So there is power in the platform. And then you also have the months where, hey, there was something suspicious on your account, so you're shut down. So you make 100,000 one month, and then the next month that account shut down, and then you get it back 2 weeks later, and then you got to get that traffic back. It was just so volatile that what we ended up doing was, even as you said, was diversifying. We were on Facebook. We were still on Amazon. We diversified and started our own brand on Shopify, and we made it this whole ecosystem where it's like, okay, if one goes down, then we have the other two to keep it afloat. But if you're solely at the mindset or solely at the positioning of the platform, if that platform changes, then you're just out of business. And so if for anyone thinking about getting into e-commerce, is my suggestion would be this, almost the same as speculate, is get into it, because it is a real business. You can do millions and millions of dollars, but speculate first. Get started, see what works for you. Go get the free information off of YouTube, off of Google, off of podcasts, and then see what works best, and then start going deeper into it. But don't just go all in. Don't go invest $15,000 with a mentor, because unless you know what they're really doing and what they're really selling, you're going to be left. You're not going to be able to sit there and actually make the returns that you're looking for, because a lot of times you're going to get into a mentorship and they're going to teach you Amazon, but if you don't understand why, then you're going to be stuck. And for us, is being able to create an ecosystem where you have multiple platforms was much more powerful, especially if you can start your own brand. And I'm not saying go and like creating something, but just go and even selling a large quantity of a single type of item, but doing it on Shopify and then adding fuel to it with Facebook, adding fuel to it with Amazon, that and Instagram shopping. Doing it that way gives you power, because you become authority in the space, and the other two are rocket fuel instead of being the only fuel.
Nice. Okay. Because, and this was way back in the day. Oh, man. This is probably maybe in 2011, 2012. But a lot of people don't realize that my very first business is a company called Asili Tiba. That's Kiswahili for indigenous remedies. And I sold herbal capsules and herbal teas. But I built my own website, and I did the shipping myself, and I filled the capsules myself. So I guess this is way before Amazon drop shipping, and I don't even think it was called e-commerce at the time. I guess technically it fit the conditions to be e-commerce. So I do have a little experience when it comes to e-commerce, if that would count, but it's a very different scenario. I had the inventory myself, and I filled everything myself. And there are pros and cons to that method. But just hearing what you're talking about as far as these platforms, I'm really hearing the pros of operating with them, but also the cons.
Yep.
That's important to show both sides, because I know there was a trend where everyone was hopping on Amazon drop shipping. And like so many of my friends are saying hey, Elijah, you should get involved in all this. I'm like, anytime something blows up too fast, that raises a red flag for me. So I'm just going to fall back and watch y'all do it. If it's still there in this current form in a few years, maybe I'll think about it. A few years passed, and some of what you're telling me has occurred, because I don't know if Amazon always had that in their terms, or if they changed it after drop shipping occurred. Do you know?
They changed it. So in the beginning, they did not have it. But as more and more people started selling the same exact thing and getting on more and more listings, because for those listening, what you do, and you may not even realize this if you're listening, is when you go to Amazon and you buy something, there is a possibility, if you look on the right side of your screen and go to the bottom, it'll tell you how many people are selling the same thing. So you may not realize, but when you buy something, you're not buying it from Amazon. You're actually buying it from somebody. Now, that may be somebody's business, but so many times when you drop ship, especially on Amazon, is everyone's competing for that buy box. And so if I'm drop shipping something from Walmart and it's $20, and then on Amazon it's $25, and I'm going to put it at $24.99. That way I can get the buy box because I'm 1 cent cheaper. And I want to be really, really transparent, if you don't mind, with us and our results with Amazon. We made $1 million in 2019. And everyone hears that and it's like, man, that's amazing. But I want you to understand there's a difference between making and keeping.
Yeah, gross.
We made $1 million on Amazon and kept 10%. We had 6 employees. We did almost 20,000 transactions. We kept 10%. That is not much money for that amount of work. And that is not sustainable. One thing comes up and you're out of business, period. And that's what happened. And so I want that to have that level of transparency here, because I don't want people to get hurt. Don't go jumping onto the latest trend like that, especially with drop shipping. Like for us, we've done wholesale, we've done private label. Those models take longer. There's a much higher barrier to entry, more capital needed, but there's more sustainability. that's yours. It's harder for you to get kicked off of it. You can go make a brand on a Shopify, go make a brand on Facebook, do whatever. But if you want to get quick money and you go on to Facebook or go on to Amazon and you're drop shipping, you're leaving yourself at risk. Because now Facebook, they are not an e-commerce platform. They are a social platform first. And so there's a lot of power being able to utilize that for e-commerce. But especially with drop shipping, so many people have flooded the market that it's just not there. Now everyone's competing the same way they did on Amazon. They're trying to drive the prices way down. And so you have to be able to stand apart, do something different. Just because it's working doesn't mean that it's working efficiently. See what you can do to set yourself apart, because that's where the margins are going to be much higher. That's where your profits are going to be higher. That's where you're truly going to generate something that can change your life instead of just trying to follow the trend.
Got you. So I will say we're kind of jumping the trend a little because we indirectly kind of hopped into some questions I was going to ask later. I'm gonna go back there in a sec, but just backing it up a bit. What initially got you involved in e-commerce? Like at some point you got interested. What got you interested, and what made you decide to hop in?
Oh man, that's a whole story. So with me and my wife, we got married I was 20, she was 19, and we had our son about 6 months later, and she didn't want to go back to work. And what happened was I was making $13 an hour, and I said, hey, that's great, but you got to figure out something for money. So she got into an MLM at that time, so multi-level marketing. And what ended up happening was I said, hey, you know what's better than one person doing it? Two heads is better than one. So I quit my job and came home. We had $500 to our name, and rent was $750. So you can do the math. That didn't work out too well. We ended up losing everything and ended up in a basement. And you may be asking, what does it have to do with e-commerce? I'm getting there. So when we're in the basement, my wife applies to me for a corporate position, or she applies to me for this warehouse job. Let me just be honest. Okay. And it was full-time with benefits. And I told her I'm not going to get it. I don't have a college degree. I don't know anybody. And that's just what I was told growing up. But I get that job. And as I start moving up the chain, I was in one position for about a year, moved to Fort Worth, Texas. I was there for 9 months, and I got moved up again. And when I got moved up that last time, we were in a place where I was making enough money for her to stay home. So as she was staying home, she realized she hated it. She is very much a workhorse, and I love her for it. She is an amazing, amazing person and amazing business owner. And so what happened was she put a post on Facebook, which you know you shouldn't do when you are upset or looking for something. And she said, I don't feel fulfilled in this role that I'm in right now. And my mom actually messaged her and said, hey, what do you know about Amazon? And so my wife didn't know anything about Amazon, but my mom sent my wife I think it was a couple videos, and my wife got really sick that weekend. She was supposed to talk to my mom that next Monday. And she asked me, what do you think about doing this business? And I told her no. I said, we already got burned in the past with the MLM. I'm not going back into business. I'm finally making $60,000 this year. Like, this is big money. Like, nobody can tell me nothing. We ain't doing that. And she went back on Monday. My mom asked, did you watch the videos? And my wife said no. And then my mom said, you want to do Amazon? And my wife said yes. So she went against my will. Oh. But what was incredible was in the beginning, I watched her go from someone who would get like a return, and it would make her just break down crying, or somebody leave a bad review and she'd just cry. I don't understand why they don't get it. And then within that first year, make $1 million. I watched her grow that. And again, like I said, shared transparently earlier, that was only at 10% margins. So I still had to work. And that was going into 2020. And then in 2020, in May of 2020, I started having anxiety attacks. First time ever. Go into June, I felt led out of my job, June 9th of 2020. I quit my job. And that's when I stepped fully into Amazon. And that's when we were doing I think we were doing wholesale at that time. And it was doing pretty well, but then we got shut down because of that faulty supplier. And once we got shut down, that's when we had to make that massive pivot onto Facebook, which then generated another $1 million over that next year. And we were able to help 170 kids through it, the underprivileged kids have Christmas. And that was, I just want to say it real quick, is like, everyone wants to make more money. That's why we're on this podcast. But at the end of the day, it's what is the purpose? Because for me, is at the end of it, we made more money to be able to help kids who never would have experienced Christmas. and I got to see them in person. I was the one wrapping the gifts. I was the one buying the gifts. We either raised or donated over $40,000 last year to help these kids. And so in that time and place, it's like when you get to that mountaintop that you're looking for, you need to turn around and see, how can I help? And that's what true fulfillment is, not just making money. But that's like my whole story encapsulated into how I got into ecom.
Oh, that's a powerful hustler's origin story. That's why I call it the hustler's origin story. And just to kind of sidetrack, and you're right about making this money needs to have a purpose. Like I talk about this in my book, The Anatomy of Financial Success. But everyone should have three main motivations, and it's up to you to decide what they're going to be. But you need a selfish motivation, a motivation that's going to move you for you and your immediate family. Then like a motivation that's going to help like humanity. It could be like you donating to a nonprofit, whatever nonprofit you want. But we all have these three motivations in us. One is usually stronger than the others, but you want to keep them somewhat balanced because that's what allows you to actually get out there and make this money and not get demotivated if you have all three. Some people may be a little more selfish. Some people may be a little more towards serving their family. Some people may be a little more towards serving humanity. But the point is, you need all three.
I like that. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, even last year in 2021, like when we were doing that, we helped these kids. I also went to Disney World and Disneyland. So in the same year. So I was serving me and my family with that and helping kids all in the same year. So yes, exactly as you said, meeting all three of those is very important.
Right. Okay. So given everything that we've talked about before, if someone does want to hop into an e-commerce business or start an e-commerce business in 2022, going on 2023, how do you feel? What do you feel is the best way of doing that nowadays?
I would say the best way of doing that, and I'm about to give a big time bombshell because it's different than what most people hear. When you hear of drop shipping, most people think of like selling somebody else's stuff, but there is a way to do real drop shipping where you actually have a supplier that is a real supplier that has real stuff, and they will send one product to your customer. And you want to find it that way because it's real. And then I would suggest doing a Shopify because you're building your brand first. You're building the authority. You can have higher margins. You can sell something that's typically $5. Let's say you can sell it for upwards of 20, 25 or even more. So your margins are huge. But over time, so I want to give, that's a short term, it's like drop shipping. It's basically branded drop shipping is what it's called. But long term is, let's say that your MOQ, that's just a fancy term for how many you got to order per month. That's your monthly order quantity. Is, let's say that you got to meet 200 for that product that you're selling, that you're one by one drop shipping. With that same supplier, let's say that when you drop ship it, it costs you $5, like I said earlier. Is when you do it as an MOQ and you get a bigger, larger influx, let's say that it costs you $250. So half is once you get to where you're doing 200 sales a month, you can just order it that way. And then you're able to actually pivot from being a drop shipping store to a private label brand. And it actually almost 2 to 3 times EBITDA your store. So EBITDA means how much you can sell it for. And I want everyone, when you get into e-commerce, to think long-term. Don't just think of trying to make money now. Is how can you position yourself? Yes, make money now. Do the branded drop shipping. Well, branded drop shipping just means once you start expanding and you get into the space where you can start buying larger quantities because you're already making the sales. Instead of buying these large quantities and holding it and hoping, you're already making the sales. You're making 200 sales a month in this product. You buy 200. Now it's private label because it's your brand, your products. You have physical products on hand. And if anyone wants to buy the store, you say, yes, I have all this inventory. This is mine. This is my brand. Then you look much better than I'm a dropshipping store. And based off of what I've seen stores sell for, is it really does 2 to 3 times the amount you can get. So let's say that let's say that you could sell your store for 100,000. You'd be more likely to sell it for closer to 300,000 if you do it that way. And that's similar to how even one of our friends, she sold her store for like higher, close to 7 figures, but doing it this method. So I have a friend who he makes almost $10 million a year doing branded drop shipping, and he sold 3 stores this way. And this is the way for you to get in. It's legitimate. No one's going to kick you off a platform because it is yours. It is not somebody else's. And it helps you get sales quickly without having to hold a lot of inventory or hold any inventory. And then once you get to scale, then you can start buying inventory to look to actually sell your store long term to get a bigger influx of cash. And it's duplicatable.
Nice. I really like the concept of building your own platform and having that in your foresight, because I'm just kind of comparing it to the I guess the e-commerce business I did all those years ago, and it is traditional. I held inventory. When someone bought something, obviously I had access to the email account, and
Yep.
I could run sales, which they would take advantage of. They were my customer, but these platforms like Amazon, or I'm not sure about Facebook. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but just these platforms, oftentimes is their customer. It's not your customer. And if you, for whatever reason, are no longer on that platform, all your customers are gone in an instance unless you make concentrated efforts to collect their email addresses or phone numbers or whatever it may be, some means of keeping in contact. Because if you don't have that form of contact, that's not your customer. That's the platform's customer.
Yeah, with that, you'll see people if you buy something off of Amazon, but they'll have like a QR code inside of the box. It's like scan here and leave us a review. And then when you scan it, they'll be leave your name, email, and then your review. Technically, according to Amazon's terms and conditions, that's off limits. So if Amazon found out that you're doing that, exactly. So if they found out you're doing that, then you just get kicked off. So Facebook is not that way. Facebook is very wide open. There's Facebook Marketplace and there's also Facebook Shops. Shops is more if you have an LLC already. So there's many ways, especially when we talk about building an ecosystem, is start with your own brand, Shopify, but then I would add Facebook next because you're going to be able to capitalize on their people. And because you have an LLC, if you have an LLC, you have Facebook Shops, which keeps up with all the analytics of your people coming in, and it helps you even build a email list there. So I think that the power of Facebook, there's more because there's social media that's attached to it. You can sit there and have a Facebook group for your products. Facebook page, I apologize. Facebook page is you can have your stuff there, have your shop there, have your brand being built there, have your Shopify as a authority piece. And then once you're getting more to scale, then you use Amazon, because that really is just like pouring gas on a fire instead of starting on Amazon. Because you, like you said, is if you go get 100 sales there, you cannot control it. That's not your customers. You don't have an email list. You have no way of contacting them. But with Shopify and Facebook, if you know how to do it, there is ways for you to be able to keep them as customers, run sales specifically to them. Facebook is their own platform, so they love when you do. If you ever do get into ads, they love when you keep them on the platform. So if you're pushing them back to a Facebook shop instead of to a Shopify, it actually generates more sales at a much lower cost per acquisition.
Okay. And you might have already answered it, but my next question was going to be like, what platform or platforms do you feel are the best to start an e-commerce business on? But like, you literally just answered that question. That's good methodology on where to start and where to end up from a platform perspective, while keeping, just the main goal intact in terms of building your own brand. Because now that I'm thinking about it, as long as you check all these boxes off, this is a very sellable business. Because e-commerce platform, business is gonna, if you build it right, it's gonna have its own customers, its own standard operating procedures that you could put in Google Docs or whatever, and it's very systems based business. So you could take yourself out of the equation and just put someone else there.
Yep.
Which means that it's easy to sell. Someone, they just look at your numbers, look at the revenue, like, okay, I'll buy it. Literally like Shark Tank, like, okay, I'll buy it for this much. Y'all negotiate. Then you can literally just hand off the keys to them and make a big payday. And theoretically, rinse and repeat if you wanted to.
Yep, absolutely. Now, for us, with us, we got it systemized to the point where we weren't even in it, and it was still generated $1 million. Why? Because it is very systematic. If you have great SOPs in place, we had, I think, 4 virtual assistants. So with our 4 virtual assistants, they ran the whole store. They ran the whole business. And we just checked in, made sure everything was running effectively. We sit there and we said, okay, we need to tweak some things here. We need to work on this. We need to axe this. But we didn't have to be in the day-to-day grind. Because there's a guy who reached out to me where he was watching us from afar, and he picked up because I was posting about it, what we were doing, how we were doing it, and he followed what we were doing and ended up generating $1 million himself, which is cool. Like, I thought that was awesome. This guy just watched my stuff, but he said that he does it all by himself. He said, I'm doing 200-300 orders a day alone. And I'm just like, dude, that is so much because you're doing so much by yourself. You're just going to get burned out.
It's like day trading.
And so, like, having, just as you said, with e-commerce, and especially doing it this way, you can systemize it out to where you have your, I would suggest virtual assistants, because there's some great ones out there and you don't have to pay them a lot, but it is a lot for them. I want to break that stigma too, that some people used to hear that we were paying our VAs $3 an hour. I think we worked them up to $3.50. And they would say $3.50, that's not even a livable wage. In America, it's not. But in the Philippines, where we had our VAs, that's almost the equivalent of making $17, $18 an hour. So the average is much, much more for them there. And for them is like, they had 8-hour shifts. They were off after that. We kept up with all their time in one place. They always got paid on the same time. So for anyone who could come in and look at it, they could just take it over easily because it was already so systemized that you could really plug and play. And that's the power of e-commerce if you can get into it and do it right.
Wow, I think you might be kind of psychic, because it's like you're pulling the questions out of my head and providing the answer before I actually ask the question. So I was going to ask, is it possible to make this business fully passive or mostly passive? And you already said yeah, but we have talked about some SOPs. Like, you give maybe a few examples of what SOPs does someone need to have in place if they have any dreams of making this truly passive or mostly passive?
I would say the biggest one is to make sure, especially if you use people like we do with VAs, especially from the Philippines, they don't speak English the best. It's not their first language, but you got to have the right people in place to do your customer service. Customer service is by far the most important. So when you're doing product research, we had one VA that would do mainly product research, and we had a couple when it came to fulfillment, and we had a couple we had 2 for customer service, 1 for fulfillment, 1 for the front end, like product research. And what we did was, with the customer service, they spoke the best English. But you want to make sure that when you SOP it out, is you want them to communicate how you communicate. So, hey, in this situation, say this. In this situation, this is how we respond. And then you keep up with what they do. So for us, when we're sitting there doing 300 plus orders a day, you got to imagine we're getting almost sometimes double the amount of messages. And so with them being in there doing customer service, we would just go in and look through their messages and see how are they responding. And then we would either correct or congratulate. And so if they were doing it right, we congratulated them. If there was a little correction needed, say, hey, instead of doing that, we do this a little bit more this way, because this helps serve the customer at a higher level. And once you are able to get them, because it's hard to SOP a person, but once you're able to get them to kind of stay in these guidelines of, this is who we are, this is how our brand speaks, then it's easier for you to put it in. Because we even did it. Is we actually had it on a Google sheet, and we put, if somebody messaged you like this is how we respond. And we had it because we got so many of the same messages over and over and over that we were able to say, when they respond like this, you say this. And when they reply like this to that message, you reply like this. If they need help with shipping, you say this. If they need help with tracking, you say this. And we were able to SOP out almost an entire conversation over time. And so I want people to understand that's the one that you're going to need the most time and effort in, because that's the most influx. Yeah, sales is one thing, and then fulfillment's another. Finding the right product, I get that. But your customer service has to be top notch. I'm not sure about you, but when I buy something, if there's an issue with it, I want to be able to talk to somebody and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. Can you help me? Or if there's not, my cable company here, the cable internet is great, but even for them to set it up was a pain in the butt because their customer service sucks. So you got to make sure that your customer service is top notch. So SOPing there first, and that comes over time, and just understanding that it's not going to be perfect day one. It's going to take more and more messages coming in, more and more sales, more and more ups, more and more downs. And then you'll be able to have it so SOP that you can go on vacation to Disney World, Disneyland, and actually enjoy Galaxy's Edge and hang out with R2D2 instead of being worried about, oh, did they message these people right? Or, oh, there's a message, I got to respond. It's like, hold on, Chewbacca, before I get this photo op, let me respond to these people. It's being able to have those conversations, SOP is the most important, that customer service.
Okay. So yeah, and where people that haven't ever built an SOP before, it's never gonna be perfect when you come out with it. It's more so like, let's just start the damn thing, get it on a doc, and then we just begin the process of updating it every time something new occurs, or we find a better way of doing XYZ.
Yep.
It's never gonna be perfect starting out. It's always an ongoing thing that you just keep updating. So yeah, just to kind of set expectations of people in the audience, because that's something that's universal when it comes to SOPs or standard operating procedures in general.
Yep, I 100% agree. And that's where I find so many people, even getting into business, is they get afraid because they want it to be perfect. Like, for you to get good, you got to suck first. Just get into it. Like, get in and suck for a long time, and then you'll get good. But you're not going to just go into something and just be good. It's not going to happen. Because even if you're genetically wired a certain way for business, let's say, is yes, you may be the Wolf of Wall Street and be great at sales, but I bet you, like, being great at sales is one thing. But if you don't have a system to fulfill, that's a whole nother thing. Because even with, if anyone knows Alex Hormozy, he was great at sales, and it was actually killing his business because he kept selling and selling and selling, and they kept getting refunds and refunds and refunds. And so he would keep selling, and it kept creating a bigger and bigger problem. Just because you're really good in one thing doesn't mean you're great at everything. So being hyper aware of, just get started. Stop worrying about being perfect, because you won't be. And you're not going to be good in the beginning. You're going to suck at something. And just be okay with sucking for a little while until you can get good at it. That's how your SOPs are going to be, because you're going to start off by saying, this is how we do it. And then somebody's going to look at it and be like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, because you could have easily shortcutted 6 steps if you just would have done this one thing. You'd go, oh, I see that now. And then you are able to correct your SOP and make it better. But it has to suck before it's going to be good. You just got to get started.
Nicely put. I like to compare business to sports. And a lot of people just expect to be good right off the bat. Now, you may have natural talent, but regardless, you got to put in some work before you're going to be good, regardless of talent or not. And have the same expectation if you're training for a race or training in basketball or whatever. You got to put in efforts to get to the point to where you want to be. Take away this instant gratification, because I think this is one of the problems with social media. But people see these big numbers, and then they just have the expectations of reaching those big numbers in a extremely fast time frame, but they didn't see all the blood, sweat, and effort that person put in to get those big numbers. You can't shortcut that process. You got to put that work in too.
Yeah, there's a guy that I was following whenever we were doing the MLM. And he talked about how he had been in multiple MLMs before. He had been in MLMs for, I think, 10 to 15 years. And then he joined this one MLM and went all in. And overnight, he became an overnight success. And he said, it took me 15 years to become an overnight success. So I want people to understand that is, if you see someone who just gets into business and blows up, go look at their track record. I bet you they've done something in the past that gave them the skill sets, the mindset to go into that and go quick. Because if you have no experience and you don't have any skill sets that apply to what you're going into, then don't expect to just skyrocket to the top overnight, because you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to learn a new mindset, a new way of looking at things. You're going to have new skill sets. If you're doing a digital business, then you have to learn how to speak to people. You got to learn how to sell. You got to learn how to fulfill on a digital product. With e-commerce, you got to learn how to find the product. Then you got to learn how to position your store and how to sell your products, and then how to talk to people even there. But it's all skill sets. So if you are someone new to business and you're hearing this, or you're someone listening and thinking about getting into it, is look at the skill sets you already have. If you have skill sets that apply to a certain business, then that may be one that you want to go look at. If it's e-commerce, let's say, if you have an eye for products, maybe you see one that, like, you're sitting there watching Shark Tank, you be like, hey, I know that's going to fail. And then you go and look at it next year and it fails. And you look at a product and be like, oh, I know that one's going to win. And then they buy it and then it blows up. Then maybe you can go into e-commerce and have a little bit more success because you have a skill set. But look at what's in your hand first, and then go see where you can apply it, instead of just jumping into something and saying, oh, I don't know what happened. It's like, You didn't have any prerequisites. You had no skill sets going into it.
Mm-hmm. Nicely said. Okay. So a lot of people, with this being the Side Hustler Society podcast, some people do want to remove the word side from the word side hustle, just become a hustler, go into this full time, or go into whatever we're talking about full time. I do know there is full time potential in drop shipping, but with that being said, at what point would you say that it's appropriate for someone to start entertaining thoughts about doing this full time and leaving their 9 to 5 if they decide to do so, or do you feel like they shouldn't?
I want to make it abundantly clear. Me quitting my job with Amazon still not generating that much money, it was because I knew that I was supposed to. And there was this innate feeling inside of me that led me to quit. But even then, it was not psychologically, it didn't make sense. And for everyone else listening, what I would suggest as an actual practical step is, let's say you're making $60,000 a year in your job. Let's just say is if your side hustle is making 100,000 revenue and you're only bringing home, let's say 30. If you're doing an e-commerce business, 30 to 40% margins is actually pretty good. And if you're bringing home 30,000 for the year, quitting your job, you're losing half of your income, more than half. And actually, realistically, you're going to be losing even more than that because you're going to be taking 60 straight off the table. So I would suggest that getting it to the point where it's almost double what your income is on your normal job. So if you're bringing home 60, then get it to where your side hustle is bringing home 120. Because then when you quit, you're not really losing anything. You're able to just step right in. And again, even in that time frame, another practical step is just keep your expenses where they are. If don't take well, now I'm making more money, so I'm gonna go buy a new house, a new car, and I'm gonna go on more vacations. Like, until you have stability, until you're a year or two in the business and have been able to either, and I wouldn't even say keep the same results. If you're keeping the same results year over year, you're not growing. Your business is actually dying. You just don't realize it. So if you're growing year over year, then you can quit. Then you can go into business full time and then wait another year after that and make sure you're still growing year over year before you start increasing expenses. But that is a very practical step, is make sure if you're making at least 2 times your income, because you're going to be taking 60 grand right off the table, but you're going to have more time in the business to scale it. But if you're making at least 2 times your income, then you know that you can. And if you're listening to this and you're hearing about e-commerce, you can systemize it out where you don't have to be in it. So you may even, if you love your job and you want to do something on the side, you can even systemize it out and stay in the job. But I would always suggest, if you are systemizing it out and making good money with it, enough, at least double, is I would leave and still go full time into this, remove the side off of side hustler and just be a straight full-time hustler. Because then as it grows, you need to have your eye on it a little bit more and just watch it, not necessarily be in it, but pay attention to it, because it's like a child, especially a toddler. I've got a kid, he's 8 years old. Is the more time you take, like, as he grows and he gets bigger and bigger, the more I need to keep my eye on him, because he'd be running off and doing some stuff he ain't supposed to. And so that's how your business is going to work too. Is in the beginning, when it's small, when it's a baby, it doesn't move. You have to feed it, you have to take care of it, change its diaper. But as it gets older, it's going to be able to take care of itself. It's going to be running around, and then if you're not paying attention, it's going to be breaking stuff. And stuff starts breaking, then there goes your profits. You're hemorrhaging money. You don't even realize it. And I know that's a very funny way of looking at business, but that's honestly the truth. I relate business to my son.
I think that's a beautiful analogy. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And I don't have any children yet, but I do have a number of nieces and nephews that I did have to take care of from time to time when I was growing up. I can relate to that analogy. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience can.
Yeah, and for those of you listening and you can relate to that, is just, if you are not in business, really do think of it that way. Is in the beginning, you're going to have to spend a lot of time with this thing. Is if it's a baby, it's in the baby phase. You're going to have to spend time. You're going to have to inject a lot of life into it. So if you're working a full-time job, understand that if you don't have as much time to put into it, it's going to take a little longer for it to grow. And then once it starts growing and it gets into that toddler phase, you're going to be able to, maybe, in a funny way of looking at it, hire a nanny, which is basically hire an employee, hire a VA to watch over it. And then as they're watching over it, a nanny is just going to take care of it. They're not actually helping it grow. They're just sustaining. And that's something that I had to learn to experience. And so you still have to put the right people in place. You got to go get them a teacher. You got to go get them some extracurriculars, whatever it is to help them actually grow. And then as they grow, that's when you have to pay more attention to them, because them in themselves have more intricacies, more complexities. And so one thing could be off. And if you don't catch it soon enough, then all of a sudden they're, like I said, they're running off and hiding and breaking stuff, and their attitude changes. And now something that was great isn't going so well. So just pay attention as you scale something, because it doesn't get easier. It actually gets much more difficult with the complexities.
Gotcha. Yeah, y'all hear that, audience? Is very, very visual example, but it's very practical too. So I would say that we are getting to the time where we're going to wind down the podcast. But I'm always ask my guests if they have any questions they want to ask me, not just about the Side Hustle Society, but just like any questions you want to ask me. So do you have anything you want to hit me with, Steven?
I would say the one thing when I was listening to your intro is, with all the things you've done. So from being the DoorDash driver to sitting there and having Airbnbs, and then you have your other businesses and you have the book. Why did you decide Airbnb out of all the things, especially rental arbitrage? Because that's what we got into. Why that?
Interesting. I decided that because I had an original game plan. The original game plan was to one of my channels talked about Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash stuff called the app lifestyle. But I never want to stay in that niche. I want to build a channel up and then pivot to a personal finance niche, and then take the earnings from that and go into real estate. I decided to just put the personal finance stuff on another channel called Financial Anatomy. And, the game plan was in full swing. Then a little something called the pandemic happened, which just put the whole world on pause for like a year. So I just kind of sat there like, well, I can now get into real estate, but there's so many factors out right now. It's like, it's probably not the best time to actually go do something. And I was staying in the Airbnb one day, and I saw on the outside of it, it said like these apartments are leasing. I was like, let me actually just think about it. Now, the person who's doing the Airbnb host, they could be doing it illegally technically, but some told me he wasn't. So I was like, okay, if they're leasing, maybe they're open to letting people Airbnb. So I decided to call that number and just ask some questions. And once I got the answers I needed, I said, thank you. I started looking into, okay, well, since traditional real estate might be on pause for now because no one is going anywhere, everyone is staying put. Maybe I could go into this Airbnb stuff in the meantime, so I can go ahead and branch off into real estate in some form. And then when this stuff blows over, this was like late 2020. When this stuff blows over, maybe I can take the profits from that and go into traditional real estate. That's what I did. So I looked into how to do rental arbitrage, how to negotiate a rent, how to make your place appealing for guests. And it turns out that I actually I did like it, because it provides a balance to making money online. For everyone let's bring it back to a statement he said earlier. It's not about how much you make, it's how much you keep. So you got gross revenue and net revenue. Your net revenue is how much you actually made minus expenses, and that includes taxes. These online businesses are great, but you don't have that many expenses, which means that you're going to be giving Uncle Sam a fat check. So one thing with the rental arbitrage is I did a worst case and best case scenario. Best case scenario, it makes money. Worst case scenario is I break even. And if I break even, this is what's known in accounting as phantom income, because this isn't tax advice, but all the rent from my units is tax deductible 100% because I'm doing rental arbitrage. So that means that some of that income tax liability, it can offset the higher margin business. So that's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario, I make money. So I win either way. So that's what got me in the Airbnb game, and that's what's keeping me in here. Eventually, I am still going to go into a traditional real estate, but I might go ahead and keep this Airbnb rental arbitrage as part of my portfolio instead of like, okay, it served its purpose. Let's sell this furniture and, go buy a property and get in traditional real estate. I think I might just actually do both.
That's cool. That's really cool. That's the same reason why we got into it, because we did the same thing in Nashville, Tennessee, for anyone wondering. And I think the power of it too is something that we noticed is like for where our units are, is it's very near everything. It's very near downtown, and you cannot buy real estate there. There was a apartment that was for sale near it, like a condo, let's say, and it sold for $700,000. So and it was actually further away than where our units are. Mm-hmm. And you got to think, for $700,000, it's going to take a long time for you to recoup that off of rents, even doing short-term rentals. So for us, being able to leverage that same way, where like with us on our e-commerce business, is for us, we got into it at the close to the end of December of last year. So we're almost a year into it, and we didn't make any money before the year closed. Like, obviously, we put in a lot of money. We didn't break even before the year ended, so we took a loss. And we're able to leverage that against our business. Now, like you said, no tax advice here, but we were able to leverage that against our higher grossing business and actually get a huge write-off that really cut into our taxes. If it hadn't been for that, our tax bill would have been fat, like you said. So yeah, that's why we love Airbnbs too, especially with the rental arbitrage ways, because you get to write off a lot. And it does help you leverage. But I also believe, for everyone listening, like that was my secondary plan. It was not what I started in. And because I had capital to do it, I had capital to buy all the furniture, I had capital to pay the rent. Like you still got to turn on the electricity, turn on all the utilities. You still got to pay the first month's rent, put down the deposit, buy all the furniture. So it does take capital to get into it. And so we went and generated capital online, and we transitioned it and put it in what we believe is more real estate. And so for us there, it's the only thing that's really fluctuating is the people coming in, the people coming out. And then you can actually impact that instead of putting it in. If I'd have taken all the money that we'd made and put it into crypto, I would be crying. I wouldn't be on this podcast right now, because I'd probably be, I don't know, I'd be under a bridge somewhere probably, and that's what, as we said, just going back full circle, is even with the rental arbitrage, is make sure that you're not putting everything that you own into it, because there's a learning curve. You got to learn the right positioning. Like for us, it wasn't too hard to get into it and immediately start being able to get more people renting, because it was almost similar to product research. Well, we know if we buy a product like this and we take pictures like this and it positions it this way, that we're going to stand out. And that's what we did. And we were able to capture more renters. And we had, going back to what I said not that long ago, is we had a existing skill set. We had a prerequisite skill set going into it. And that's something I want to talk about with that. Like when you talk about with the rental arbitrage, is I love it in the space, in the place that it is. And I think that traditional real estate is amazing, especially if you can get multifamily, but you got to have capital. It's all about having that capital and using it wisely, instead of just dumping it all in one place.
So yeah, when it comes to short-term rentals, I did a podcast with Micah Ortiz from Airbnb, and I'll refer my audience back to that podcast where we talk about the benefits of rental arbitrage, of owning, of short-term rentals in general. But yeah, it can definitely work magic if you look at it the right way. Now, you do need capital to get involved in it, but I have a very similar situation to you. Like my units are in East Dallas, very close to downtown and very close to all the hot spots. And if I was to acquire real estate in that area, which is an up and coming area, like buying the actual real estate, it would be pretty pricey. Not to mention that some of the stuff that I want wouldn't be available, but it is available to do rental arbitrage.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's where the power of it lies more. There's a guy who we met him, and he had 2 units in a pretty hot area in Tennessee, but he had invested, I think, like $300,000 a piece. So right at $600,000, and that was before furniture. And it wasn't even in the area that was nearest. Like there was apartments right there. And we explained to him what we do, and he goes, "Wow, I wish I would have met you before I spent $600,000." And this guy was a doctor, so he has the capital. But he's like, I wish I would have met you first, because now I realized that we could have just done that. I actually have a friend who just called me and said, hey, maybe you should look at renting an apartment down there and doing that, because you're just not going to be able to find the real estate you want to buy for a very decent price in the hottest areas. And again, I believe there's power in both, having physical where it's like yours, you own it, and having that short-term rental. I think there's power in both of it.
Yeah, definitely. I will say this in our cases, and we'll bring it back to e-commerce kind of closing out. But for a lot of people, e-commerce is going to be a online business. Now they find their supplier, but like the transactions happen online. It can be a good counterbalance in a variety of ways. If anything, just to balance out the expenses. Because for people who do rental arbitrage, but it's all they do, some people say that is risky, because what if something happens and you start losing money or whatever, and you're stuck with like these leases. I'm not disregarding any of that. I'm just saying all that is very minimized if this is kind of balancing the scales to an online business. Because even in the worst case scenario, you're still coming out ahead, which is beautiful in my opinion.
Yeah, 100% agree. And that's exactly how I would look at it. And that's what I was touching on a few minutes ago, was using it as a counterbalance. I love that, because you generate capital online somewhere else, and then you're leveraging it here, and then you win either way. If you make money, great. If you lose money, great, because you're actually going to be able to have a huge write-off, which is actually going to make you money. People don't realize their biggest expense is actually taxes. Taxes is by far your biggest expense. So if your tax bill is going to be $50K, but you lost money on your rental arbitrage, let's say you lost $10K, you're actually going to be able to write off all of that against that. Now, again, no tax advice, but you're going to save. You're actually going to make more money because you lost money, and that doesn't make sense, but it does if you know that actual whole how that works and using it as a counterbalance. But if you were only 100% in rental arbitrage and you lost 10K, you just lost 10K. So you got to know how to do both.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about the rental arbitrage is, even if you, because my units tend to cash flow between $600 and $1,000 per month, but even if you do make money, it can still work out so that that tax, once again, not tax advice, entertainment purposes only, but it can still work out so where some of those expenses can still counterbalance your online portfolio, and you still made a profit in rental arbitrage. That's what I love about it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Steven, for people who want to get more of you or want to check out what businesses you got going on, where can they find you?
So right now, typically I send them to stevenpemberton.com. Right now we're in the midst of reconstructing that, so that's under construction. So the best way to connect with me is either through Facebook, Instagram, Steven Pemberton. Look for the dude who looks like Aquaman on those pictures. That's probably going to be me. And when you go there, if you message me, it's not a VA. I don't have someone that does that messages people. That will be me. If you want to connect with me that way, our business is also hollowco.com if you want to go learn more about what we do there. But if anyone wants to get in contact with me, those are the two best ways, because you will get direct access to me. I am open and available for now, because right now we're bringing on more mentees. We're helping more people. So as I scale more in the digital space, I'm not going to be as available. But I do want to make myself available to people, because if I can give back and help you avoid some mistakes going into it, I would love to, because I didn't have anyone like that. And that cost us tens of thousands of dollars. So I just want to throw that out there, that it is right there for you guys.
Cool. So we'll definitely leave links to Steven's social media and the website he mentioned in the show notes. With that being said, we'll go ahead and conclude this episode of the Side Hustler Society podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you can give us a thumbs up for YouTube algorithm, very much appreciate it. If you could drop us a review on Apple Podcasts, that'd be awesome. So we're going to go ahead, conclude this episode. Get out there, make money, everyone. Stay on the hustle, and be safe and be profitable.
Peace.
This episode may be over, but your hustling journey has just started. Visit thesidehustlesociety.com to access all links and resources mentioned in the show that will help you on your hustler's journey.